Hello, everyone. So I'm Dib. For those that don't know, I'm a caster and player from South Africa. Today we're going to be talking about the Hearthstone Championship Tour for the 2018-2019 season. This was a bunch of news basically just announced today by Blizzard. And we're basically going to be looking at this, and in particular, I'm going to be looking at how it affects players in the more marginalized fringe regions, basically. Looking at it from the perspective of players from Africa, for one. Okay, so let's just look at the new tour overall. So basically, we're going to be sticking with this kind of three-season format. We're just not talking about it in terms of like winter, summer, spring anymore. Um, we're gonna have the season starting January 2018, going all the way through to December 2018. And that period splits into three different seasons. So a 3 month season, a 4 month season, and then another 4 month season with the playoff with the championships and or the playoffs and the championships finishing later in the season. So you can kind of see in season two or for season one, the playoffs are in May and then the championships in June. So they're happening a little bit later, especially if we look at a way it bleeds into 2019. Usually we'd have the World Championships here in January, but now we're going to have basically the summer playoffs for the third season in January, and then only the championships in February, and then the World Championships will be May by the looks of it. It's off. I'm guessing that's kind of where they're going with this. So yeah, so that's basically how that one's the season structure is going to be. That's nice. It has a longer season. One of the interesting things that they've included as well is this idea of these Hearthstone Masters tiers. This is kind of something that's a little bit ripped from Magic the Gathering. And then we have kind of a bronze, silver, or gold master here, or 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, depending on which way you look at it. Um, so obviously you get increased um, reward for staying at those tiers of masters. Obviously 200 points is the target to get a three star master. That's the big thing that people are interested in because that gets you a straight invite to the seasonal playoffs, which is obviously really massive in terms of saving you time having to grind the tour circuit and earn the HCT points that you would otherwise need to get there. Obviously, the other thing that's quite big is getting the appearance bonus for up to 3 events per season. So that encourages these players to still keep going to events because the appearance bonus basically kind of covers their costs and stuff, and probably still allows them to walk away with a bit of profit for going to events even if they don't place. So that's definitely some encouragement. Um, and then 2 star master, you just basically lose the seasonal playoff invite, and you go down to 1,000 appearance bonus for 1 event per season. And then 1 star master, you're just getting the invite to monthly online tournaments with cash prizes, and everyone's getting the end of year commemorative swag, which is obviously something everyone will want, but that's not the kind of thing you're playing for as a professional player. Um, Now, when it comes to actually getting to these point targets, they're quite ridiculous. We'll see a breakdown of the points a little bit later. But to get 200 points is a massive amount of points that you need. I mean, if we look at this last 2017 season, your top points earners in like Europe, Scintillols are getting about 145 points, and basically you need to have reached that 200 points in the 3 seasons consecutive. So that can go across 2 different years, as we see here, but it's basically just 3 rolling seasons. So you still need to keep up your points tally in that third season quite high, even if you're not just trying to get the points to get an invite to the seasonal playoffs. So to maintain a Masters rank is going to be very difficult. I really only see players that are getting consecutive high finishes at championships, which award a lot of points. I only really kind of see those players realistically maintaining a 3 star master level. But it will be, definitely a notch on your belt. If you can maintain a 3 star master level, that'll be a big achievement in and of itself, regardless of any other wins that you kind of need to get there. Or even if you can do it without getting wins, that also shows immense consistency. And it's good that they are rewarding consistency. Um, Another thing that's pretty good is they're increasing the prize pool for playoffs. So all the way down to everyone that competes in the playoffs now will actually be getting a minimum of $1,000. So that's a big motivation for players that are newer to the scene to make the playoffs. Although once again, you're not really doing that for money. getting the higher monetary reward helps cover costs because there's going to be less playoff venues, so more people are going to have to travel. So if you're traveling within your region, that still maybe helps a lot to cover the cost. Another good thing is the pro team standings. So basically, the teams that have the highest points earners, uh, the teams of three that you can register basically will be getting a prize per player here. So they could have just quoted these prizes as per team because you just multiply all these by three to get what the team will earn. But I suppose they're quoting per player because the players get the rewards and then the teams are kind of gonna cut it. And ultimately, I mean, we're looking at it's $22,500. That's not really much for a year's worth of competitive play for most of these teams that are used to tournaments like the International or LCS or Counter Strike Go majors where the teams are earning a lot more. So ultimately, I don't think that's going to be enough motivation for a lot of teams to come in, but it does certainly help subsidize the cost of having players for teams, and that is pretty important to stop teams leaving the scene so readily. And if it's cheap enough for teams to have players, they could definitely do it, especially if players are getting the masters ranks, and that's helping them if they're getting 2-star or 3-star master. That can help them cover costs for travel, which is one of the big costs for pro teams as it stands right now, until we kind of reach the point where players are earning salaries and nice stuff like that. So, to summarize, the Road to the World Championships is going to be similar in a way to how it's been before. You have your Season 1, Season 2, Season 3, all the ways you earn points, all the regional playoffs then lead you to the seasonal championships. So here we can see the seasonal playoffs. These are all the ways you get there, either 3-star master, through the HCT points, or through the Challenger Cup stuff, which we'll get to in a second. Um, but yeah, I mean, basically, if we look at the HCT point breakdown, um, for uh, you're getting, I think, more points now for placing well in the seasonal championships and playoffs. It seems it's the same number of points for a playoff place and a championship place. So I don't know if that duplicates. So if you come first in the playoffs and then first in the championship, I don't know if you'll get 60 points. If you do, that'll definitely help to get towards getting that tier 3 master. It's going to be very difficult to hold that as well after that, especially when that month rolls out of your 3-month rolling window. And then there's the tour stops. So we don't have much information on tour stops. It seems they're going to be like replacing the majors pretty much. So, your dream hacks, those kind of events are kind of what we see as majors at the moment. Hopefully there'll be more, but that's another problem as well that we're going to come to. They're going to be a very crucial part of earning enough points because in order to earn the points, another thing they're changing is they have a set point total that you need to reach the playoffs. Not a case of just a top 64. It's a set playoff a set threshold that is going to start at 45 points and then balance per region, meaning that Europe will end up with the highest points tally, probably required. So, what that's going to mean is um, to start off with, in the first season, you're going to need to place top 25 for 3 out of 3 months basically on ladder to earn a qualification through that if you're not able to make it through tour stops. And if we look at the calendar when we get there, it doesn't look like there's going to be any tour stops in January, so we're only going to have ladder players basically making it through, plus the challenger. Oh, sorry, not just January. So it's three you need to earn top 25 in the first season. So in January we're not going to have any tour stops. So we're only going to have 6 tour stops in the whole first season. So a large portion of your points are definitely going to come from ladder, which is a little bit of a problem right now. As ladder is kind of one of the least fun parts about playing Hearthstone competitively, to be honest, especially for someone like me that really likes the tournament matches far more than ladder. Anyway, so yeah, we're gonna look a little bit more at the breakdown of points maybe. The other interesting thing is the HCT challenges. This is kind of replacing the Tavern Hero stuff we saw. So you're able to now earn cups, earn points. Sorry, instead of earning points in HCT online cups that were happening, those are going to be replaced by Challenger Cups. And if you win a Challenger Cup, you can qualify for your region's Challenger Finals. And then if you come top 8 in the Challenger Finals, you make it through to your seasonal playoffs. The big problem with this is a lot of what they've done is meant to reward consistency, but depending on the format of the Challenger Finals, you kind of win a cup, which is usually single elimination because of time constraints. Then you play a challenger finals. If that's a big single elimination tournament, that's going to be absolutely ridiculous. We're talking one cup to reach the playoffs then, which obviously that's a low time investment, but you have to kind of high roll that one. And if you qualify for any of the three previous seasons for HCT playoffs, seasonal playoffs, you're not going to be eligible to play in the Challenger Cups, which is another weird thing. Like, what happens if you're playing in a Challenger Cup and you get beaten by somebody in, let's say, the semi-final or the final that wouldn't have been eligible to take that challenger spot anyway? How does that work? They're kind of taking spots away from other people, and maybe you are better than the person that they play in the final, but then they beat the person in the final, then they give it to second place instead of you, and that's really complicated. So I'm going to be interested to see how exactly they plan to resolve who's allowed and who's not allowed to play in Challenger Cups, and how that kind of works. Um, and so yeah, I mean those are the kind of the major ways. We can look at the season one calendar, it's a bit shorter. The season two, a little bit longer. You can see kind of the playoffs from season one. Anyway, all this information is available if you want to look at it in more detail. Really, what this is about is me telling you my thoughts on it, and this is really where things are going to start getting a little bit more fiery. So we've spoken about the fact that it requires 3 top 25 finishes on ladder to get the minimum of 45 points right now, which is ridiculous for most players. That's going to mean a lot of grinding, especially towards the end of the season. A lot of nail biting to see if you can hold your ladder spots at the end of the month. And they haven't really done anything to make that any better. The ladder grind is just ridiculous. A lot of the times it can come down to, especially in the last few moments, about which decks you manage to queue into. If you queue into an unfavorable matchup, you can basically lose your top 25 spots and lose out on points, and then you can miss out on the championship. And that doesn't really in any way reflect how a tournament works. And that's the biggest problem I have with using ladder as a metric to qualify for these major tournaments. You could be a ladder god, but be terrible at constructing lineups and playing a lot of decks. I mean, the most ridiculous example is if somebody's, let's say, a god at playing Pirate Warrior. Now, Pirate Warrior, let's say, remains good, and they managed to hit a rank 25 playing. Rank the top 25 legend by playing Pirate Warrior. But then when it comes to a tournament, they literally can't play any other decks. Now, you've taken somebody and you're saying this is one of the best players, but actually they're just one of the best players at that one class. And realistically, that's not how the ladder meta evolves. You shouldn't be able to do that, but theoretically, it could be possible that that ladder play doesn't really transfer into tournament play, and we've kind of seen that a bit with the performance of some of the pros in the scene. So that's one of the issues. Um, for me, the biggest issue, though, is about how this split of points is really affecting the regions. So if you are unable to make tour events, it's extremely difficult to qualify for the seasonal playoffs. As I said, you basically just have to do it on ladder. Now, I like the idea that tour events are going to be more important. It's become a little bit more like Magic, where you have to go to play in these big events to make it into the scene. But it does mean you kind of have to be living in the regions, and they kind of teased at tour events being international. But for somebody in Africa, I struggle to believe we're going to be getting any tour events. And even if we did, even if we got one in like the whole year, that's not really going to be enough. You'd have to win that event, let's say, and that would only maybe help you qualify for that season. Then you need to still be getting points in the seasonal playoffs, getting more competitive points from that, and then moving that on to qualifying in the next one. It's very much a snowbally kind of system, which I really don't like. This 2017 year, I kind of didn't really, I wasn't really playing that much Hearthstone come the end of last year and the beginning of this year, so I didn't really get into um, the HCT grind that early, and I felt like it was really difficult to catch up, because you didn't have the little bit of points that carry over if you make the playoffs, and that really helps you kind of snowball the first playoffs appearance into more and more, which can be good, because it can help players that get their first taste of playoffs to then do better at the second one, etc., etc. But it makes it very difficult to break in anywhere else in the year other than right at the beginning. And then, yeah, I mean, it's really about the tour stops, right? So now they're going to be reducing the number of playoff venues as well, which could quite frankly mean Africa gets cut entirely. As it is, we only have one event happening in Africa, and that's up in Joburg in South Africa. Which South Africa is not the most accessible country in Africa for the majority of Africa, but we have pretty much some of the best internet infrastructure. And to be honest, we've had much better internet infrastructure than a lot of the European venues over the course of the playoffs events. When we did have people playing in Tavern Heroes and whatnot that I played in, we had as our venue, we had problems with other venues' internet connections being a problem, and ours was fine. And that's kind of silly if you think about the difference between Europe and Africa. You really shouldn't be seeing that kind of thing. So it's not like we should have it taken away because we are one of the problem venues in terms of internet access. That's not really the issue. The big issue is we haven't really had many players actually taking it seriously. Hearthstone's kind of been growing slowly, especially here in South Africa, and we're seeing a few more players that are considering taking the leap to playing more competitively. But now you basically just have to grind ladder. That's the only way to get there if you're playing from Africa, and that's like kind of ridiculous to be honest, because if you can't play the tour stops, you're just so disadvantaged. So, you know, I think that's a big problem, and it makes me really disappointed because uh, as somebody from South Africa, if you want to take part in a lot of esports, a big problem is ping. Now, ping to European servers and American servers is pretty bad. The best you get for games, let's say like Dota, Counter Strike, is maybe 140, 180 milliseconds, and that's not really a ping that you can play on a fair, even competitive footing with in those kind of games. But Hearthstone was kind of special, and one of the reasons I gravitated towards it as an esport, not just because I like card games, but it's also just because ping doesn't matter for Hearthstone. So it was completely fair in the terms of like you could play from Africa, you play against the European players, you play against players from all over the world, and you can immerse yourselves in those scenes, compete in those scenes, and really get involved and improve yourself, rather than being stuck only playing against your local teams and local opponents, where what often can happen is you have one or two good teams and they kind of just play each other and they don't really improve enough as fast as you do when you're playing better people and losing to them, quite frankly. Losing is one of the best ways to improve. And so I think that's really disappointing for me as a Hearthstone player. I'm kind of looking at this like, okay, I feel like I'm being excluded because I live in Africa, essentially, because I don't live near a tour stop venue. And to be honest, it kind of extends beyond that. It's not just the people that live in Africa or maybe South America. I don't know how many tour stops they're going to be getting. I imagine more than Africa, but probably not that many. It's going to be a problem for people in those regions, or even just people from more previously disadvantaged backgrounds that are playing in the that are wanting to make Hearthstone a competitive esport for them. They don't have to have the fanciest computers, the greatest peripherals. You can play it on your phone and theoretically be competitive. But now you actually have to travel to all these tour stops. And honestly, besides just travel costs, that takes up a lot of time. It's very difficult to do that if you're working a full time job because of just getting all the leave is a big problem for a lot of people. For a lot of people, you can't necessarily take leave, and you can only maybe grind in the evenings to play, let's say, currently HCT Cups and ladder. But it's going to be so difficult to make the qualifiers, the playoffs, sorry, if you don't go to the tour stops or make it to the previous seasonal championships or are able to snowball it in some way like that, especially in Europe, where there's probably going to be a lot of tour stops in Europe, and it's going to be great for the spectators. You get to watch lots of good competitive Hearthstone all year round. But for a player like myself, it's just so it feels so insurmountable to try and make it to a competitive level, or not even a competitive level, just to make it to break into the scene, because I can't realistically be going to Europe, uh, 2, 3 times or every month basically. If you're looking at it, you probably need to go to two or three tour stops in a season in order to have a reasonable chance of getting enough points to help with the ladder placements. So I think that's going to be really sad for people from the more fringe areas in that want to get involved in Hearthstone, and I think that's really disappointing. Basically, just making Hearthstone more of an exclusive club to your North American, European, and some of the Asian countries. And honestly, like I personally find that really disappointing. I'm really, really sad about that. I was really looking forward to starting the grind come January for HCT points. I've been taking some time off to refresh myself because I know how difficult that grind is when you're grinding for months on HCT cups and ladder. And it really takes the toll out of you, especially when you're working, a full-time job like I do. So I'm just really, really disappointed in the effect it's going to have for South Africans in particular, and Africans as a whole, and honestly everyone in those fringe regions. So I think that's a really big issue with the new Hearthstone Championship Tour format. Overall, as a spectator, I'm excited. As somebody that works in casting and stuff, I'm also pretty excited. Although for casting as well, it's a problem because tournament organizers are worried about expenses for flying you from Africa to these events. Like, it doesn't even matter how good you are as a caster. Um, it's difficult to be able to get tournament organizers on board to fly you, and they can just fly in somebody closer, even if even if you honestly don't believe that they're as good a caster as you. It's easier for local people to get the jobs, which is sometimes a good thing, but also sometimes a bad thing. In terms of for something that's global like esports, we really want to be having the best players from across the globe and the best talent. And so that's a little bit unfortunate from both perspectives for me. So yeah, I mean, my plan at this point is still to just try. I'm gonna try grind ladder. It's something honestly I really don't like ladder. I much prefer playing HCT cups and those tournaments. I got some cup wins last or this year, but and those are really really exhilarating moments. But grinding ladder is just really not that for me. So that kind of makes my heart sink, and I'm gonna have to basically bite the bullet and grind ladder there, which I can kind of understand. That's a little bit of a me problem more than a system problem, but the amount of ladder grinding that is required, even like top ladder pros, it's going to be difficult for them to get enough points from ladder to get anywhere near those cutoffs. So yeah, it's really going to all be about the tour stops, and that's the big disappointment because I feel like that's going to make things insurmountable as an African Hearthstone player. And we've seen a lot of growth in the African Hearthstone region, in the African Hearthstone scene this year. ESL Africa has been really big. We had the North African players, two Algerian players traveling to South Africa for that finals, which I was actually casting, and that was a really great event to see. And those are the kind of events that can definitely help us improve the overall level of play in Africa. But there's no reason that. But it's difficult when players can't commit to playing at the top level because they can't go to these kind of tour stops. And yeah, ultimately I'm kind of droning on about the point, but that's kind of the issue for me. And yeah, sorry if I droned on a little bit there. It's like I don't really know what to say. I'm kind of really upset by this, and it's kind of like it feels a little bit dream crushing at this point. Um, and I'm really trying to make esports happen for me. It's a massive passion of mine and something that I'm really trying to turn into reality. But at this point, honestly, it looks like the only way for that to be real for me is to move to Europe or Asia or some other region where I can actually attend enough of these tour stops. And honestly, even though maybe I could make that happen for myself, um, it's not really a path that many players are going to be able to follow or many players are going to be able to do. Even for me, it's a massive financial risk. Never mind, taking years off my like career as a dev to kind of you're going to have these huge missing gaps in your CV, and that looks really weird. And it's kind of putting your whole career on hold to do this. And I don't know. It's really just I don't know, disappointing to me. I'm struggling to really put into words exactly um, like all the ways that this disappoints me. So yeah. Anyway, thanks a lot for listening. Please, share your thoughts with me and let me know. Um, maybe I'm missing out. Maybe we can, raise some awareness. Maybe Blizzard can at least consider some of these more, fringe regions and maybe find a better way to include players from these regions that legitimately can't make most of these tour stops. I think that's going to be a big problem. But yeah, other than for my own prospects, the and well, actually, not just my own prospects, right? It's prospects for the players in the whole region. it's very difficult for me to kind of encourage players to try for HCT points now when it seems like such a ridiculously insurmountable task to actually get there. Um, but yeah, I mean, uh, for the first world and Europe and America, sure, it seems great. Still going to be really rough to qualify in Europe, and that's one of the other big problems about being in Africa. For those who don't know, South Africa and most of the Africans, we kind of fall under the European region. So when we want to qualify in terms of points, it's against the European region, and that's pretty rough for those that don't know. So yeah, it's pretty sad. Only hope is that they scale down the points a lot, but then you end up with too many people in the seasonal playoffs, and I don't know. I honestly don't know. So yeah, just please let me know your thoughts. I've just shared what my thoughts are, and honestly, at this point, I'm yeah just very saddened by the news. So let's hope it turns out better than I'm anticipating. But yeah, anyway, for now, my hopes are not up, but my passion is not downed.